We got another one. What's up, everybody? So, a few things here. First is a comment from one of you. I really appreciate it. This one's an old one. This from Peter. Thanks for doing what you do. I did get the welcome email. I started listening to Bad Christian in 2018. And then last year, around January, I was excited when I found out you were doing Pastor with No Answers. It has been encouraging in my life. I do skateboard ministry and want to serve the Lord, but I've had to reshape my faith and the way I look at the world the last couple of years. Thanks for helping me learn and making me laugh. Oh, man. Thank you so much, Peter. That is a huge compliment, and that is one of the reasons why we do what we do here on this podcast. So I was telling you all in a former episode that my daughters had to deal with in their mind a big old Trump and gay pride flag from the same truck downtown Charleston. It just seemed like a paradox, and they didn't know what to do with it. Well, check this out. My brother texted me and said, I saw a truck in front of us with a big-ass American flag flying. Next to it was a big F Biden flag. Then they had 2 pro-weed bumper stickers, 3 different LGBTQ stickers. He said, WTF, the most confusing spectacle. Oh, I love it when humans are complicated. So I think my mind is made up on something. I've been thinking about it a lot. But you know how oftentimes, and to my chagrin, lots of Christians too, they'll hear someone talk about something that's polarizing and it offends them. And they're like, oh, shut that TV off. Or I don't want to talk to that person anymore. Or that person's just blind and so frustrating. Don't you think maybe the first step to love is to listen? Like to listen to people that you don't even agree with. How are you supposed to love them if you don't understand why they think the way that they think? You can even be convinced that you're right. I don't think that's the most healthy thing to always be convinced that you're right, but you can. But can you just listen to someone and where they're at and maybe even allow them to be wrong? But listening is something that we can't do anymore. My Lord. So listen, it's the first step of love. IMO. We got Ryan and Ellen for you. And then we've got, oh my gosh, a fun conversation with the former pastor turned gay non-Christian. I hope you enjoy.
Oh, my poor kid. Him and I are so attached. Like,
is Cole there?
You're not
like
there?
Feet away. Yeah, Cole's here, but he wants to come.
Gotcha.
Who's Cole?
He wants one of them titties.
Cole's her
Cole
husband.
is my husband.
Okay. I do feel like titties
Y'all
is
rolling?
kind of offensive to me, but titty is completely not offensive. It's amazing.
You recording, Ryan?
Mm-hmm.
Wanna come say hi to Joey? We'll say hi real quick, okay? Hi to the guys for a minute, okay?
What's up, Lou? Hey, Louie.
Say hi. Say hi to those guys.
Hi.
Ryan doesn't
You got a
like
good
little
smile.
children, but I do.
I like them. I just
Oh,
don't
Ryan.
like
I'm
like
kidding.
them.
No, that was a total joke. Of course you like them.
It's okay to not like kids.
Yeah, but
No, I
that
do
it
like
was
kids.
just I felt
It's
that.
not a binary.
Yeah, he does, and so I just didn't want to misrepresent him. Yeah, our kids love some Mr. Ryan, that's for sure. Oh, I forgot to tell y'all that I got hit on in front of my kids, but I realized it was my fault. So we were at Crust, Ryan, you know where that is, and this was the day before or the San Francisco 49er Green Bay Packer game. And so I had my Packer gear on, and this woman, probably about my age, she said, "Go Niners." And I said, "Yeah, but sorry, not this time around." I was like, Green Bay is definitely going to win. She was like, "Oh, yeah?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, pretty much San Francisco, and San Francisco did win, so I ate my words." But when I was, it was almost like she switched to this like sexy vibe and said, "Where are you watching? Where are you watching the game?" And I was like, "Oh shoot!" I was like, "Oh."
This reminds me of that J-Lo
I pointed to
movie.
my kids and I was like, "Oh, with these guys."
I haven't been hit on in so long. I feel like that would be a real boost for me right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Where do I
You
go
gotta
to
be
get
out of the
hit on
house
now?
without a kid? Because people feel even creeps feel creepy about hitting on people with kids in tow.
Yeah.
So, which
Although
I'm
I
guessing
do-
doesn't happen much.
I do know a couple single moms who need a good guy to come along and be like, "Hey, sup?"
Come around them and pour into them and all that. I get you.
Oh, gross.
I get you. Hey, let me ask y'all this. I got the boys 2 scooters for me and Priscilla. Both both of us get the boys 2 scooters for Christmas. And one of them was a little defective. I mean, it was problematic. It was shutting off. And by this time, it was all scraped up and everything because we're like a week into it. Well, I finally call Walmart because I'm like, William, it is messed up.
Well, that was the first problem.
Right. Well, it's a great brand.
Fucking newbie mistake.
Yeah. But check this out. I think it
May I
worked to my
please speak
benefit.
to a helpful customer service agent? Go ahead.
But listen. So I talked to the guy on the phone, and he says, when we send you the new one, all you have to do is fold up the old one, put it in the box, and go ship it. I literally was thinking to myself, if I do that, it is going to end up in the junkyard, in a warehouse sitting there in the corner. Mm-hmm. They are not going to fix it, polish it up, and put it back on the shelf. This scooter is going nowhere. So I was like, I'm going to take my chances, see if they send a scooter. And if they do, I'm basically waiting on Walmart to charge me because I have not sent that other scooter in. We're keeping that scooter. I get the moral implications, but I think for me, I think this
not moral implications. They just have your credit card.
No. See, I think they're so freaking unorganized. Like they sent an email saying, we're sending. I think please send it in by January 12th. Ryan, I got that email today, so it just shows how completely disorganized they are.
I would have gone to Goodwill, spent $6 on another kind of bike or whatever, stuck that in the box, sent that away. They would be like, "Oh, scan it."
Genius shady right there.
And then you have 2 bikes. One you can just fix.
Yeah,
that's so fucked up, but that's genius.
See, I feel like what I'm doing. I feel like what I'm doing is like a football player pass interference. They don't get caught. They weren't cheating. They did a pass interference. They didn't get caught. They're within the rules. So basically, all I'm doing is I'm waiting for Walmart to charge me for the extra scooter. If they don't,
this is Donald Trump's entire defense on his tax evasion investigation.
I'm probably wrong, but I don't regret it.
I ordered 2 fanny packs, I ordered 1 fanny pack the other day. The company sent me 2. I did the right thing and got on their chat and said, "Hey, you sent me 2 fanny packs." They said, "Great, I'll send you a thing to pick up the other one." I was pissed because I was like,
you thought they were going to be like, just keep it.
Yeah, just keep it, right? They said, "We'll send you an RMA, whatever. All you got to do is print it out and send it back to us." I'm like, "Oh, fuck y'all. Okay, I'm going to do it."
That's work for you.
So I did it, and I told my wife, I was like, if they credit me for that as if I returned the original one, I ain't saying shit, and I'm going to keep that money. And she made me feel bad about that. And that's exactly what happened, but I didn't feel guilty at all.
But the thing is if you call Walmart,
so I got a free fanny pack.
Yeah, you waste hours of your time, and they don't even get it right anyway. So that, for me, it boiled down to, I'm going to take all this time to package the scooter up, send it there. No one is going to, they're not going to get that scooter back out there.
I agree with you, but if you're a company like Walmart, that can't be your policy, or everybody's going to take advantage of it.
Okay, we have to stop talking about Walmart. I'm going to take this somewhere darker. We're talking about like basically semantics. I have been in the thick of it with a couple of friends who are going through divorces right now.
Is this one
really? Is it the moon?
I think
is this the affair of 2 of your close friends?
It's just our age.
Yeah. So one of them is dealing with like a narcissistic, like absolutely mentally ill person, and it's scary. The other person, her husband confessed to a physical affair that happened, a year and a half, 2 years ago is when it ended. And it was like 4 or 5 times of like, like physically messing around with this woman. But then he felt so bad, so guilty. He just, he felt like God forgave him and blah, blah, blah. Well, she didn't know until he confessed to her a couple months ago. They've been married for 13 years.
Why did he confess to her? Was it by his own volition?
Because this girl, he's not a girlfriend, but this woman was in love with them and basically like obsessed with them and threatening to expose him because he was working at church and all this stuff. And so he finally was like, I can't deal with this. And so he confessed to his pastor, and his pastor was like, we are going to your house and you are talking to your wife. So that's been the last couple months, just like dealing with this with my friend. It's like really tough because we love him and it's just very confusing. What I've seen is the church community that they're a part of, most of them, and of course his family and mostly like the older people in their church are pressuring her to reconcile. Also, like their marriage was not pretty up until this point. He's dealing with some anger issues. This was just the icing on the cake. This was like she's saying like our marriage is over. I want a divorce. It's been very bizarre to hear people that I know that are just incredible people who are compassionate, empathetic people who are saying, well, it was just a blow job, but he works at, but he's a Christian and he knows the word. So she should really reconcile. And
Such a weird, they said that
so
he knows
weird.
The word.
Yes.
So she needs
so weird.
Even the demons believe and shudder. See?
So if they were just reconciling her to forgive based on a principle that Jesus seemed pretty excited about, would that be offensive, or is it just the means by which they're justifying the behavior? It's, the rationalization, I guess.
It's more like they are not seeing her as a hurt and broken person who's been abused. And they are saying it'll be better for everyone if you just keep your mouth shut and do, because apparently
she feels like they're trying to sweep it under the rug.
Divorce is the greatest sin. I don't know where it says that in the Bible. Sorry, I just totally derailed this conversation because it's been on my mind and I don't know how to deal with these people.
That's just blows my mind. He knows his word, so you need to go back to him. That's so crazy.
But I'm assuming what you're pointing out are the gratuitous outtakes from this. That's not
sure. I mean, those are the juicy examples. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. But even in the mundane conversations, is it still that vibe is really coming through?
It is that like just give him more time. Just give him more time. And it's like, at what point do we say that a woman who has been cheated on, at what point do they get to just do whatever the fuck they want to and divorce if they want to and not have to have the pressure of the church saying, but God loves reconciliation.
Yeah, but
and he loves...
I'm super shocked because the church for sure acknowledges infidelity. I mean, because they really take to heart Jesus saying, like, outside of adultery, no divorce sort of thing.
Right. And I will say that their pastor, one of their closest friends, is one of the really awesome pastors on the Marcel podcast. And we trust him. We love him. He's great. It's just like, it's the Christian culture that they're in. Like everybody thought they had the perfect marriage and everybody thought that they're this great Christian couple. I guess I just don't really know how to support her besides just saying like, girl, you do you.
Yeah. I'm just curious if it's like people really being insensitive to her, or are they just being tone deaf because they kind of learned some tropes and some answers that always seem like infallible truths.
Like God doesn't give you anything that you can't handle.
Yeah, that kind of bullshit.
I think it's mostly that they just don't want anything bad to happen, like a divorce.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think
it's sad and bad.
Agrees that it's sad. Yeah, that divorce is sad.
Also sad is your husband getting blowjobs from a lady that you think is your friend. So,
jeez.
I mean...
the two divorces that I have heard about recently, husband and wife hanging out with another husband and wife getting super, super, super close. And
it's because it's COVID.
And one of them falls in love with the other and vice versa.
They're COVID affairs.
I don't know why that seems weird, though. That seems like the most obvious thing in the world.
Obvious.
Like if you love that person and you love their spouse, why wouldn't you be more predisposed to falling in love with their spouse?
I don't know. I mean, I can't... I love your wife to death, but I'm not
taboo. But it seems like it makes a ton of sense. Just because you don't think you have you don't have a shot with my wife.
You just have to.
That's the only reason you're not trailing her right
now. So sometimes with my husband, I'll be like, okay, if one of our friends was a child molester, who would it be? Or if one of our friends,
good gosh,
he absolutely refuses to play this game with me. It's because I want him to be so uncomfortable and just say something, but he can't even entertain it.
And you can't. That's like the most vulnerable thing ever. I can't imagine a thing that could be thrown back in your face faster.
So here's what's interesting is, I mean, I'm close to both you guys, Ryan. And I'd consider you one of my best friends, and I don't know where you're at in your faith. I know that you have hinted at the fact that you're not sure what you believe or if you believe. And so I am curious to hear that, but with this context, listen to this tweet. I really don't understand how people can be, in my opinion, so blind to what they're saying. So this is at Living God's Truth. I think it's a person. I don't know how I stumbled upon it.
God, way to set yourself up for failure.
All right. So it says Christianity does not progress with the times. What is Christianity? Do not be deceived into thinking there's a progressive form of Christianity. It doesn't exist because the truth never changes. Right when I hear that, and I hear this from people that I love and respect too, my first question is, you have God tagged right now. You have him pegged to where, of course, I don't think God changes. That's not the point. The point is, I'm glad we changed our perspective of slavery and what we were getting out of the Bible. I'm glad we progressed in that. I'm glad we progressed a little bit with science. And, some of the stuff that's in the Bible that we know is different. I cannot understand how people can't see, is asinineness a word? And I'm trying to, I don't want to be mean, but that makes no sense. Basically what you're saying is, right when I accepted Jesus, I figured out God and I'm never going to change now? Do y'all think that's crazy talk?
Well, for me, it's more of this idea that Christianity cannot be progressive. And it's like, Jesus was like really progressive. Like, I don't get why there's such cognitive dissonance there.
Ryan, I don't know where you're at, but when you hear that, does it ring very black and white in your ears? Like, how dumb is that? Like, I'm trying to.
No, it just rings that somebody's just scared, and they're trying to be. It's not even scared. I think that's overly reductive. I think they're trying to be protective, and I think that it's all it is just like a public criticism of some things that they disagree with. People changing their views on something because it seemed convenient culturally.
Yeah.
And I think that all of us could come up with a lesser example that we think's annoying of people doing that kind of thing, like fitting their religious convictions to suit what seems convenient in their life or culture. But I just think it just looks fearful is all it is. And I can relate to that in other ways that probably seem as equally asinine. I'm actually just trying to make y'all feel guilty about judging them.
I think I'm giving myself liberty because I actually don't have a name connected, but there is a name connected. So I don't want to be mean or insulting or anything like that. That's not the purpose. But Ryan, can I ask?
You disagree with them. That's okay.
Can I?
You know what I don't get? It's like if people are very quick to say like things like Christianity can't or shouldn't be progressive, how come they don't also use the alternative term, which is conservative? They would never say Christianity should always be conservative.
That's true.
It's
I actually
weird.
was thinking about that because I don't think that's offensive to a lot of people in that particular context. You know what I mean? Like honoring the traditions and honoring all of the work. So here's what I do think that I can relate to just a tiny bit if I'm trying to get in their headspace. It feels like when people are quick to redefine God's truth, so quote unquote, it feels like it's got an element of hubris to it and an element of not respecting a lot of really intelligent people that put a lot of thought and effort into ironing out some theologies or ironing out some understandings of biblical interpretation. And it does, I could see how that would come across as like, you guys have no respect for all these really smart, well-intentioned people that came before you. It seems like you're just throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Baby Jesus, no less.
It's so interesting how radically my faith has changed. When I hear things now, I'm like, oh my gosh, that used to be very normal dialogue for myself. And this one is just so crazy ironic to me. So someone passes away. What does a Christian ask?
Were they a believer?
Were they a believer? How?
That term is so ridiculous. My friend who's an atheist is like, I believe in a lot of stuff. I'm not an unbeliever.
But here's the thing. How big of a question is that to ask so casually? Because what that person is asking is this person burning forever throughout all eternity? That's what they're asking. And it's so casual. Was he a believer? And then if they say no, you're like, oh, man. you said, oh man, to someone burning forever. But I get it. Tough. I get it. I'm not making fun.
Because you're thinking it. You think it at times, don't you?
Is somebody a believer?
When you find out somebody died, does your brain not make that computation to a certain degree?
No, because I'm more of a...
You're sensitive enough not to say it out loud.
No, I'm more of a Christ-centered universalist. I think Jesus saves everybody.
Yeah, now, but you weren't before. It's like conditioned that we all still kind of think that's what Ryan's saying.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But I mean, what the irony is, like, the more progressive in my faith I become and the more freedom and grace I give to myself, the more comfort I have as far as that stuff goes. And it's like, there was so much fear. All that stuff is so fear-based. It's weird. It's like, I may not be like super strong in my faith anymore, whatever that means. But I'm with you, Joey. I think Joey's given me a little bit of the Kool-Aid, and I'm like, what is hell?
What did you say as far as
Faith.
strong in your faith? Jesus said, follow me. Now, he did say, believe in me. But what's so crazy is the stuff that Paul and Jesus say throughout Scripture, they literally prioritize living a loving life. Neither one of them puts more emphasis on beliefs than they do on follow me, love your enemies, love your neighbor. That's why Jesus, for freaking crying out loud, talked about the Samaritan so highly. Do you really think the Samaritan is someone that Jesus talked about as like, now he's eventually going to go to hell because we all know that he wasn't a believer. Right. No, he was good. I
think the first big thing that really made me make a decision in my young adult life, as far as my faith went, was how come people that are not Christians working for companies that are humanitarian stuff, you know what I mean? People's whole heart are to help the sick and the poor. A lot of people are not Christians. And that was the first time I remember thinking like, but they must actually be being used by Christ somehow. It's right. Like, well, maybe, but also maybe it's just that they're following Christ by being, doing Christ-like things.
Yeah. I mean, I
think I can. Yeah, it's easy for me to make that argument, even though I don't even know what I believe about it. That was always an easy one for me. Is like unbelievers, if God's truth is so self-evident, then unbelievers are going to recognize the beauty of it the same way that believers would.
Right. And it almost comes easier. It comes easier to them because it's so blatantly obvious what to do, what to be kind and to be good. And we're so caught up in the legalistic stuff that we don't even know how to be.
Imagine if you were to ask Jesus, hey, Jesus, I don't have a lot of bandwidth. What do you want me to focus on, man? The faith and the right beliefs, or you want me to just love people? I mean,
That's an awesome question. That's an awesome question.
If you can only pick one, I want you to believe right. I want you to believe correctly. And the thing,
honestly, I would push back and say,
let me just finish my thought. The thing is, you're supposed to get your beliefs right in an infinite God who was created, exists. Like, I can't even comprehend that. And you're telling me I'm supposed to get my faith straight? I don't even know how to explain God's existence, for crying out loud.
It's weird to think that we did have our faith straight. We thought we had our faith straight.
Oh gosh, I had my T's crossed, my I's dotted.
Wild.
Systematic theology, dude.
Can we all admit that equally as laughable that we secretly believe that we have our faith straight now?
Sure. Oh, I don't.
Yeah.
That we're like closer to the truth.
Oh, gotcha.
Now.
Yeah, I would.
You think you're closer to the truth?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which is equally as laughable. Let me point out though that I do think you're conflating beliefs, i.e. theology, with belief. And I don't think Jesus cared a ton about beliefs, but I do think it was pretty fucking self-evident that he really gave a shit about whether you believed
that he was the real deal.
That he was who he said he was.
Yeah.
That was really important to him. Real important to him.
Yeah, but why?
So I would actually put that up there with like love.
Why?
Loving God. I think he equated loving God with believing what he was saying about himself, that he was who he said he was. And
it's almost
loving the neighbor.
It's almost like if you do Christ-like things and, you are whatever, blameless or whatever the fuck this like alien person would be, right?
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily believe that Jesus did the whole rise from the dead thing because he was God's son. You can't get your mind around God, but you are literally doing what we think Christ would be asking a person to do.
Once you, and I'm not saying that I'm right, I may burn in hell forever. Once I have seen, even scripturally and everything, like this whole, gosh, it seems like God really does love everyone and he's all powerful and he's going to figure all of this out. Here's how I would answer your question, Ryan. Every time I hear Jesus say, believe, 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 I hear him say, I want to rescue you. This is for you. Like, if you believe in me right now, you at least have some hope, maybe like an anchor. I mean, he even says, you've passed from death to life. I don't see that as, you just fixed your destiny. You were going to go to hell. Now you're going to go to heaven. I see that as, no, in this life, believe in me because I am the truth. I don't see that as Oh, I'm checking the list and making sure your faith was good Monday.
I agree with you on that. I think you're right. I would agree 100% with you on that. I think he's basically saying there's this amazing truth that is, that is in the ether, and I desperately want y'all to get a taste of it, and I desperately want you to get a tiny bit of understanding of it so you can see the beauty, and that all these other things will hopefully fall into place when framed in light of this beauty.
Yeah. Ellen, I got
and bonus points if you think I am the Son of God. And maybe that's where those treasures in heaven come from.
Yeah. I had Ryan on here, Ellen, a long time ago. I was kind of doing a series. I think I did it 4 or 5 times, like, why do you still believe? And the whole time Ryan's talking, he's pretty much like, I don't know if I believe, and I don't know, kind of like, I'm not like this strong believer. Dude gets choked up talking about God. I was like, Ryan,
but that's different.
Moved.
That's like an emotional response.
Yeah, but you can't have an emotional.
I find it touching the exact same way that I find certain commercials like really touching. Like those
Ryan, are you
Airbnb commercials? I choke up at all of them.
Are you doing the whole like deconstruct and then maybe at some point reconstructing?
I'm not doing the anything. I'm just ignoring God pretty much.
Oh, okay, cool.
I'm like, I don't know that I believe in God, and I'm struggling with, is that real or not? And is Jesus real, or was he who he said he was?
You have deconstructed then, in theory.
I guess I don't really know. If I'm being completely honest, I don't know what deconstructed means.
It means kind of throwing out most of the things that you were taught and that you believe because you don't.
Okay. Yeah, if what you mean is like, did I spend some time trying to strip things away to try to separate what I felt like was truth and what I felt like was, just weird stuff that was taught, weird traditions that were taught.
Yeah, that's how I use the term.
Yeah. Then yeah, I guess I spent a little bit of time doing that, but that's really tiring, and it seemed like I didn't get I wasn't very good at it.
It's not like I'm actively doing it. I'm just like sitting around not going to church, and then it's just organically happening.
Now that's where I'm at right now. Now I'm just kind of like, I don't know, man.
Well, Ryan, the deconstruction thing, I mean, examples, I don't think people go to hell anymore. I support gay people and them being in relationships. When I met you, I'm guessing 2009, you had already done all that. Like, I don't know if you ever didn't believe that way, but you had second guesses about hell.
Back where I was.
What?
I'm on like my third revolution of all this, where like I believe really hard, or I try to believe, I believe really hard, and then I try to believe really hard, and then I just quit. And then I'll get, I'll meet somebody or meet a new idea or meet a new community, and I'll get fired up again the exact same way. It's just happened like that a couple 2-3 times now.
Is there a part of you?
And I don't know what to make of that.
Is there a part of you that thinks there's a tiny chance I may go to hell? Like, do you still have that in you, or you're like, there's no way?
No, I don't. I just don't think about it. I think yes, there's certainly a chance that I could go to hell, just the same way that I think like there's certainly a chance that I may have to reap the what we've sown climate wise in my lifetime, but they're both equally so nebulous that I don't think about them on a day-to-day basis.
I think with where I'm at, it's up to me, and I have the power to experience whatever type of faith I'm going to experience. So it's sort of like if your marriage is sort of like stale, you've got the power to, like, if you want to have a robust marriage, like, you can just do that by participating and putting the work in.
I totally agree with you, except for I'm at a point where I'm going, am I crazy? Like, is my wife real? Has anybody in this room ever actually met my wife? Or is she in my mind? Like, no, I'm not actually thinking about that. I'm saying that's the metaphor with Jesus or God.
Oh, I see.
Where I'm like,
yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, Ellen, I thought you lost your mind.
I'm trying to save a marriage, but I'm also wondering whether she's just a figment of my imagination. So it's really hard to motivate myself to work on the marriage.
Right. Oh, I see.
So,
well.
I'm in Los Angeles.
Really? Is that where you grew up?
I actually grew up in Santa Barbara, so not too far. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Give us a little snapshot of your story.
Yeah, so I was a wildly tortured and depressed kid. Was kind of like the weird kid. Went to a smaller school, then ended up going to a bigger middle school, and was picked on relentlessly. My brother is also gay. He came out at a much earlier rate than I did. Once puberty hit, then I realized I also had homosexual feelings. But then I saw kind of what happened to my brother as far as his coming out and how he was tortured, and I wanted nothing to do with it.
Right. How many years apart are y'all?
We're about 2 years, roughly 2 years.
Is it a Christian family? Like y'all were raised Christian?
No, so my mom was Roman Catholic, so she very devout, but never went to church. My dad was raised in the Episcopalian church, so yeah, his exposure to Christianity was kind of dull, if you will.
When you talk about your brother's trials after coming out, you're talking about just general society and not necessarily the church.
Exactly. So in the 90s, I mean, so, the remnants of homosexuality being associated with a mental illness was still alive and well, even after 1973 of it being declassified. So, in secular culture, it was you could shrink it away. In Christian culture, it was you could pray it away. And so my parents were very much of the belief system, and also being traditionally Middle Eastern, right. The stigma around homosexuality wasn't favorable. So they actually put him through therapy. And how I perceived what happened to him was that it put a wedge between him and my parents. And so I saw that and I was like, wait a second, like I have no friends. The only affection I have is, the little affection I have from my parents. Yep. And so knowing that, like, if I was to come out, it would, put this separation between me and my parents. So right. Yeah, I actually it's funny. My dad is a very emotionally closed off person, but the two things he gets passionate about are sports and politics. And so I actually turned to Republicanism to relate with him on that level. So that's kind of how,
Yeah. dude, that whole parent thing, man, is just so hard. And it gets even worse when it's like a Christian family. I know someone personally who I don't think she's ever going to fully be who she is because of, I think she would say, a love for her parents, but I think it's more of I don't want to lose my family. Yeah. But here's what's crazy, George, is I've talked to her at a deeper level and she still isn't sure what she thinks about it morally. She knows that she's gay. She was raised Baptist. But my gosh, she was even in a very long-term relationship and it had to end because she just couldn't go all the way. So tough. So when do you come out? How does that play out?
Yeah. So it was so funny because I ended up, turning to Republicanism. And then I was introduced to evangelical Christianity when I was in.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Holy rolling, it was just. It was kind of like my thing was like, I didn't want to talk about it because back then, especially in the church, like my first introduction to homosexuality and it being a sin was the association with pedophilia and bestiality.
Jeez.
And it was just like, oh my God, like I want no association with those things whatsoever. So I never shared it with anybody. I mean, I did end up sharing it with one of the leaders in high school. He freaked out. He didn't know what to do about it. Like
a youth group leader?
Yeah, youth group leader. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, and that was like my first experience. And
how could you do that to that guy? He doesn't know what to do.
Exactly. I'm like young, dumb, naive.
You're thinking this is youth group. This is a very safe place. This is people that love me and want to help me. Let me just tell somebody.
Exactly.
Little did you know.
Little did I know. Literally. And it's like.
So you really did not know that at that point it was common agreement amongst evangelicals that it was a sin? Like you didn't know that?
I had a general idea, so I used to attend the college group, and that's actually where I got introduced to Romans chapter 1, and then I was like, and so I was sitting there highlighting my Bible, and literally I was looking around, I was like, oh my God, if these people they knew about my brother because the homosexual that was unrepentant, but it was very much for me it was oh my God, I have these feelings. I can't share this with anyone because of how much of a sin it is. People say
it's the worst one, dude.
Right, literally.
It's crazy. You can eat yourself to death. You can have sex
Right.
before marriage, get a divorce, but
Right.
don't you dare be gay. Don't even have those feelings.
Exactly. Literally. That's literally it. It's so funny because like the church.
And you know what? Let me say this real quick to my listeners. We're laughing, but I also want to just slow down and know that this isn't funny for some people. So I just want to catch myself, because sometimes I can just be a little reckless and ha, this is so funny. And for some people, they're still in a serious situation. So anyway.
No, I hear you. And same here. Like I'll make light, lighthearted jokes and all that. Cause but no, absolutely. But no, it's exactly like, and it's funny because, they teach sin is sin, and it's like, no, it isn't. Like literally you associate abomination with homosexuality, which an abomination literally means that it is unredeemable. So
the sin thing is so crazy. I mean, it seems like all you have to do is give one example. Okay. Who was worse, Hitler or my daughter for stealing a piece of gum? You tell me. Which one was the worst sin?
Right.
If you could take away one of them, what would it be? My daughter stealing a piece of gum or the Holocaust? I mean, Lord.
Literally. No, and that's exactly it. It's a lie. It's like if you actually put it up to a test against other sins, they crumble. It's like you could talk about gluttony and like you could talk about like lust, and it's cute. But when it comes to homosexuality, like beware. Like brimstone, hellfire, Sodom and Gomorrah. Anyway, all that shit. But no, I like tried to come out because I thought that was because like this. So that sermon that he gave, he had somebody come up from the leadership team, and I write about this in the book. But like she talked about how she was healed from homosexuality and was able to get married, and so then I was like, wait a second, this woman is confessing her sins. I have to do that to start this process of healing. And that's when I talked to that guy, and it was just like, nope, putting it back in the closet, going to buy these books about it, and not, the excuse was, I'm doing it for my brother or whatever. But it wasn't until college until I actually came out, but it was in the context of praying the gay away and going through conversion therapy. Yeah.
I struggled with depression and anxiety. I still do. I'm in the best season of it. But when I was a kid, I had no idea what was going on. And I thought I would get better once I got right with God. I mean, what a cluster, what? I am lacking in faith but I'm thinking faith is assurance, no doubt. And I'm like, well, I'm struggling with that. And the pressure I had on myself to have enough faith so I don't burn forever and ever and ever. I have a therapist that she made clear to me. She's like, Joey, it may not be an obvious one, but that is traumatizing. Like you were a kid worrying about you and your friends burning forever and ever and ever. And we have a lot of listeners who still believe that way, but were you seeking different theologies so that you could be who George is, or how did that happen? When did you start shifting a little bit? And if I interrupt you and throw you off, just start back to where you were, and I'll ask for my forgiveness. How about that?
Oh, no, Charles, I'm the same way. Like, I'm like, I love going through different. Yeah, cool. It's funny because so we were always taught. So when I was in my pastoral roles, we were always taught the liberal leaning theology is heresy. There's a special place in hell for them based off of some verse in Matthew. And so I always stayed away from it. So there was like that dual nature aspect where it was like, which dog are you going to feed? The sinful dog or the godly dog? And, all that bullshit. Yeah. So everything that I believed in was like, okay, so this isn't who I am anymore. My old nature, this is just sin and the devil tempting me, blah, 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 and all of that. And so I always I was deathly afraid of liberal teachings on homosexuality because it was like, the Methodists or the Episcopalians. For us, we justified it with, they're false teachers and they're going to hell. And so I stayed away from that shit. It wasn't until I left the church that I was what I call my handlers, my abusers, that things. So I went back to the church in my youth after I left my pastoral roles and all of that. And it took a couple years, but I was like, the one constant were these homosexual feelings, but I was slowly but surely chipping away from this idea that homosexuality is this egregious sin. And I was still fearful, but I listened to one of the sister churches of my home church. They were up in the Castro Valley in San Francisco, and they were reconciling with their community who was upset about how they treated homosexuality. Yeah. And the pastor didn't condone nor condemn homosexuality. It was more of like the context that he gave to the book of Romans and what was happening in Rome at the time. And that opened up the floodgates for me. Like, that's when I was like, okay, like here we go. And then coupled it with like I was doing Liberty University online, and I got a failing grade on a paper where I said that women can be deacons, and I gave all this like biblical reference, outside reference, all of that. Got a failing grade because it didn't align with the doctrinal statement of Liberty University. And that's when I think that's when shit hit the fan for me, where I was like, this is all bullshit. I could literally have the same exact verses and have my stance, but if the theology is different, you look at like Baptists versus evangelicals on baptism. If one of them is wrong, then the other denomination is going to hell, because Baptists believe that you have to be physically baptized, So it's like,
what's killing me, and my listeners, I get stuck on stuff and I talk about it for like 5 episodes. It's going to get worse when I'm a grandpa. Every episode's going to sound the same. So, but there's this outcry. I think I never got into this band, but I heard that the head guy for the band Skillet is, and I know Alyssa Childers, and then there's just people that are saying, progressive theology, it doesn't exist. God doesn't change. And I'm like, how do you not see the fact that what you're saying is you have figured out infinite God? How? Like, I'll go on and on. And on
no,
but it's just, I don't get it. I don't get how they don't see that.
I'm right there with you. I mean, it's like, okay, well, if that's the case, then you're going to bring back slavery then, right? Because James justifies slavery. Like, it's like, no, it's funny because I actually tweeted at Twitter or at Skillet on that, because I was just like,
did you really?
Yeah, because it was just like, these people are just so feebly minded. And that's the thing. It's fear. It's all about fear and control, because it's like, if this is wrong, then whatever you believe. And that's actually what my experience was, where like I held on to Christianity for my dear life, because if it was wrong, then that meant homosexuality wasn't a sin. And if homosexuality wasn't a sin, then I was a homosexual. And then that would cause me my separation from my community, from my family. So all of that fear and trepidation, if you will, like kept me locked to the system of control, because it ultimately was an expression of how I felt about myself. And I think that's where these people are coming from. If you're intimidated by somebody else's perspective, that has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with you. So no, I agree with you on that. Like 100%.
Yeah. It's nuts. Hey, as my faith has changed drastically, let me kind of come out of the closet for you. I don't want to speak from a standpoint of this crazy, liberally advanced, studied guy. This time, we'll just say 10. It could be maybe 9 or 8. We'd be having a conversation about why you think it's okay. And it wouldn't be malicious. It would be a loving conversation if you were willing to have it, but you would be listening to me saying, man, I mean, but scripture is scripture. Yeah. I would say probably 5 years later, I was at a place where once I meet someone like that girl that I was telling you about, and that's what I want our listeners to realize is typically when they hear gay person, they think, those people can you please, like conservative listeners, George checked all the boxes. He's one of us.
That outsider. You're right. Like you're not a person. Absolutely. Like, and that's what I thought about homosexuals too, where I would see my brother the same way when I was in the church, where I was like, oh, I just need to be a good witness so they can come to know the love of Christ. So no, I hear you on that. And that's exactly it. It's like, once there's a specific sin that is, it's like, okay, well, wait a second. How about these pastors that are molesting children? You're bringing them back into the fold and they're for repentant and all this shit. It's like, you don't treat homosexuals the same exact way. And homosexuality is not associated with any of those types of egregious, sexual appetites. It's blasphemous. It absolutely, especially the creator and the person they worship, Jesus, who never spoke about homosexuality. Like, it's like, okay, fine. Like, the word sodomy was translated in the 1950s and 60s to homosexual. Okay, great. Like, that was a translation thing. But it's like, okay, fine. We'll give you that. Let's give you sodomy is homosexuality. Jesus never spoke about it, ever. Right. The only thing he ever spoke about with most conviction was the religious leaders. And like you were saying, it's like, 5, 6, 8 years ago, like now, whenever I talk to Christians, I have no like qualms. It's like, fine, believe it. Like 2 of my best friends are actually still Christians, but flip the script on that. What do you do when you're confronted with somebody who has not even just contradictory information, but information that blasphemes your religion, it's like that has nothing to do with that person. That has everything to do with the security that you have within yourself and your faith.
Right.
So anyway, I could talk about that for days too.
Yeah, for sure. So I went from being what I would call a loving, unaffirming person. And I'm curious what you think about that here in a second. And then I got to a point where I was like, I've just met too many Christians that are better than me at being a Christian, and they're gay. And once you get to know those sorts of people, man, it'll mess your mind up to where you're like, I can't do this anymore. Yeah. But I wouldn't say I was affirming at that point. I was at a place to where I'm not speaking on this ever again. I'm not sharing my opinion, because how dare I? Like, seriously, these people are better than I. She knows her Bible more than I do. And then it probably wasn't until, maybe the last 3 or 4 years where I would say that I'm fully affirming. And I think it's more along the lines of, I realize how if you, at the very most, it's a gray issue in the Bible. At the most. And we're led to believe that it's just black and white, super clear. Right. And it's just not. It's just not. So my gay church days, memoir of a closeted evangelical pastor who eventually had enough. When you were a pastor, did you have to bite your tongue sometime? Did you hear gay hate speech? I'll tell you a quick story. We were at a huge conference, and I do know a lot of the leaders of the conference did not like this. So I don't want to I won't even mention the conference. I don't want to paint it all with the same brush, because a lot of pastors were upset, but it sure as hell didn't sound like it. There was a guy that said something along the lines of, we need to strive after righteousness and holiness. And that means in our sexual preferences also. And I'm telling you, thousands of people clapped, cheered, rejoiced like their team just won a touchdown. Made a touchdown. My wife, I think God made her with the biggest heart about this. It upsetted me. She went to the bathroom stall and sobbed. There's a damn speaker right above her, so she still has to listen to it. And then she goes outside, and it looks like the biggest, most rich, illustrious food and dessert. And she was like, I feel like I'm in the 1800s. Like with slavery, we just cheered about that. And now we're going to go celebrate with one another. So she gets on the bus, and, because we brought a big staff there, and a pastor that we really love who would be unaffirming. He said, Priscilla, what if God gave you something that people need? If you throw in the towel right now, because she was just like, I don't know if I can do evangelical Christianity or our church or anything like that. Once you throw in the towel, it's nope, you're not going to be of any help. Now, I don't think that's everybody's calling, especially I wouldn't put that calling on a gay person. If you're straight and you're affirming and you're happy at an evangelical church, I say stay the hell there. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what better place to be at.
Right. No, I hear you on that. It's funny because the self-hatred complex was created by the doctrine surrounding homosexuality. And you're absolutely right. Like, at best, it's gray, and so but I actually was one of those people that hated on gay people. Like here in California, Proposition 8, when they were trying to have traditional marriage legalized, basically to illegalize same-sex marriages. I was one of those people that supported Proposition 8 because of the greater complex of self-hatred that I created around myself and the self-loathing. I mean, I go extensively in this book. I talk about the craziest shit that, internally the struggle. And that's why I wrote this book too, was for parents to be able to also understand the shit that their kids are going through, if they identify in the LGBTQ community. So propagating that belief about homosexuality, and especially the association with pedophilia and bestiality, it creates this psychological dysmorphia in the person who struggles with those things, thinking that you are wrong, that you are dirty, that you are rotten, that you're irredeemable. So of course, when a system of control comes into place and then tells you how to be and how to act, that's all you know, because you don't think that you're worthy of anything else. Like, it's like, okay, like I remember praying, like I would be so lucky if God blessed me with a wife and kids. This self-hating complex was started started externally, but it went internal when I started to adopt the beliefs about homosexuality in the church. There was actually one of my roommates or housemates at the time, I remember, ended up going to the LGBT group at the local university and was, sharing the love of Christ. And it made me deathly afraid, because I knew if I was to go there, I would be, quote unquote, tempted to sin. And so I was asked to stay behind. I didn't write about this, but this is a memory that's coming to my mind. But yeah, it's this ecosystem, if you will, of hatred that's clothed in, love the sinner, hate the sin. It's no, you hate the person. Hate
that saying and hate that saying more.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, all that to say that, I mean, it's one of those things that it, unfortunately, it's hard to come by, because people associate, if you do accept homosexuality, then you are considered a false teacher, or you're leading people astray, and there's a special place in hell for you. So it's like, when you frame it in that context, it's hard for people to come to that acceptance of homosexuality because of those associations that could potentially happen to them.
Well, I want to hear a little bit about your experience as a closeted gay man pastoring in an evangelical church. I mean, you don't have to go too far into it.
Yeah. So I was outreach pastor. So I was the one who was going out there and spreading the gospel and all of that. So I had my lines down. So I was able to hide behind that facade very easily. My identity was very much wrapped around, being the one who's going to save lost souls. So I created all these ministries, did all these things, expanded the church base, all of that. But in the darkness, if you will, I would so this church was very controlling. I couldn't listen to Taylor Swift or Lady Gaga, because they were, some of the people
secular,
anything secular, literally.
Right. Mary had a little lamb, secular.
Right, literally, right. And then they put their little spin on it. It's okay, anyway. Couldn't be anywhere near alcohol. I couldn't have it in my home, all of that stuff. But all of that was palatable, because for me, it was well, I'm worthless anyway without God. So it's but then what ended up happening, so then they controlled where I was going, who I was with. So in secret, in my sinfulness, I had an iPhone that I would look at stuff on the internet with, and and then repent to myself, but never tell anyone about it, because if they ever found out about it, I would be ostracized from the community. But what eventually happened, this happened for about a couple years in the pastoral role, and then people started to attack me because I was listening to podcasts from different churches, and they didn't like that, and so they tried to put this Calvinist spin on it. They say I was becoming a Calvinist or whatever. They tried to get me to disassociate with those things, but it literally was the only thing that I was holding on to, because everything else I had sacrificed. And I was I put a Bible verse from James chapter 4 on Facebook, and the pastor texted me and said, "Hey, why did you put that? Would you put that? It's, supported by the Calvinist belief system." So I started to test him a little bit, and I would just post Bible verses that I knew were kind of Calvinistic, but and then constantly call me, text me. So there was all this monitoring that was happening. But the one thing that finally broke the camel's back wasn't actually related to homosexuality, because I was okay with, praying the gay way. I was okay that they pimped me out like some Christian bachelor with the available women in the church and put me, set me up with this woman for 8 months. And oh my God, I write about all that too. But the one thing was my education. I finally got to a point where I was I needed an accredited degree. I've been doing their Bible college, and it was my ultimatum. I was either I do this or I leave. Anyways, rabbit trail, long story short, ended up choosing Liberty University. They were okay with it until the next day I got an email from the pastor saying, "Watch out, beware, blah, blah, blah," pretty much threatening me and telling me not to wig out. And that's when I lost my shit. And I was just I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm done with this control. I started to get angry about how they were controlling me. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily homosexuality that actually made me leave the church. It was just all these other things. And then the slow trickle into acceptance.
I bet you, do you think that was the beginning of your journey of freedom? Would you be where you are right now if you had not left when you did? That seems to be the starting point of your freedom, because you don't have them looking over your shoulders and judging. And
I love that. I ponder that all the time. For the first 2 years, I was really angry about my past. It was very after leaving the faith altogether, I was very angry, and I because I allowed these people to manipulate me, but whatever. And then I started come into my own, when I started to accept the unknown and dismantle the absolutisms in my life, it was very much like this freeing experience. And now, where I'm at with everything, like I'm thankful for that experience, because you're absolutely right. If it wasn't for because I'm a pretty, I don't know about hard-headed, but I'm very like committed when I commit to something. Like it's like I'm very, focused. And so I do see where the universe allowed me to go through this experience to really go to hit rock bottom, to then be able to rise from the ashes, if you will. And now I look at it. It's funny because where I used to think Liberty University was a liability, I now see it as an asset, because now I'm like, okay, look, I went to this extreme, and like you were saying earlier about like, hey, he was one of us. Like I was one of you. I was recruiting people into the church. If it wasn't for that experience, I wouldn't have the story that I have now to call bullshit on everything, and to be able to inspire people to disassociate. And just you were saying about like, if they found an evangel, it's about your community. Does your community accept you? Do they embrace you for who you are, not who they want you to be? I think that's the litmus test.
So how do you feel? We've had conversations along these lines. Just, we talked to a friend of mine who actually is a part of a church that they're pretty much unaffirming, but he understands it because he was unaffirming for a while, and that's kind of his family. Mm-hmm. What do you think about a Christian that says, look, George, I love you. We can be in the same fellowship. We can be brothers. I've got, and I'm speaking from a fictitious character. I've got my sin. You've got yours. I love you. How does that land on you when I say a loving, unaffirming person?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the context of what all that means for me. It's like I actually had a person who wanted to write about me in Christianity Today. He's a pastor, super cool guy, wasn't affirming, but wanted to highlight the importance of how homosexuals are treated in the church and stuff, and kind of bring light to that. I see it in what are the conditions. And so when I was like looking at, when I asked him about that, I was like, well, what are you going to write about? I was like, do you accept me for me, as opposed to trying to put a Christian perspective on it and saying, look, we need to love everybody. And even though we don't agree with them, I have a hard time with that, because if you say you love me, do you love me? And me means that I'm a homosexual person who's okay with their homosexuality, who is not a religious person. Okay, let's put me back in the context of the church, who, can see that the doctrinal beliefs around homosexuality is bankrupt and corrupt and deceptive. So it's like, if we can have, let's talk about fellowship. If fellowship is, celebrating in each other's, the things that we believe in, if we're not on the same playing fields, I have a hard time with that, because then you accept me conditionally. You don't love me unconditionally. Like it's interesting, because my two best friends that are Christians, one of them, they're married, and she's very much like, I see no problem with it. Da, da, da. My other one, he was my roommate, and he has a harder time with it. He has a more conservative belief system, but I know that they love me for me, and they ask about me, and they want to see me with somebody and being happy and all of that. They're not trying to convert me. They're not trying to change my mind. And I think that's kind of where that it's more of like, what is the context of that friendship? Are they trying, are they being there to be with me, or do they want to try to change me? And I've become a very good person in perceiving that, because I tried to change people. So it's like, I know when someone's being authentic. Yeah. I mean, I have multiple stories of that, to be honest. I'm thinking about a date I was on, all that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You want to tell us one?
Oh my gosh. So he's called the self-hater in the book. And it was like it was a couple years after I left the faith, and I went on a date with this guy, and we were flirty, texty, all that kind of stuff. No inclination that he was a Christian. So we got to coffee, and we sat down, and we're talking, whatever, and the subject came around to religion. I didn't share. I put my cards on the table. He shared that he was a Christian. I was like open to it. I was like, okay, cool. Like, let's talk about it. And so then he started going into this about how God weeps at the side of gay parades, how homosexuality is an abomination, and all that. And I'm fuming at this. I mean, literally, I write in the book, I was like, if you could throw water on me, it probably would have vaporized.
Yeah.
So I just asked him point blank, I'm like, hey, can you tell me in the Bible where it says homosexuality is a sin? And he looked at me dead face, and he's like, I don't really really know the Bible that well. And then I ripped him a new asshole, and I was just like, you know, it's one of those things that like I you know, after that it hit too hard, close to home, and that's why I think there was so much anger. I look back on it now, and I have more information about this guy from a mutual friend, and found out that his self-hating complex was triggered by something drastic that happened in his life that then ended up causing him to turn to a system of control that told him the essence of that he was correct, that he is dirty and that he is rotten. And so that's kind of what reinforced it.
When you say that's the religiosity of here's how it is for sure, you mix that in with a bunch of people who say that they're loving. Like what would you say to those people? Would you just be like, you need to do your homework? You need to look closer in scripture? What would be your encouragement to them if they're like, I want to affirm. I wish, you know, because I've heard people say, I wish it wasn't a sin. I would love to just not even have that in my head.
Good question. I think that also then comes back to what is the motive behind it. So I think about Jesus when he says, don't cast your pearls before swine. If they're swine, like if they're just, you know, like hard-headed, I think a good example is this. So I was in a Uber with two of my gay best friends, and, you know, we're just chatting it up. It was clear that we were gay. And the Uber driver like ended up like he's like, hey, can I ask you guys something? And like my friend in the front seat like tensed up because, you know, for good reasons. Like he, you know, like it's just when you hear things like that, they're trigger words. And so, and he's like, you know, how did you guys know you were gay? Whatever. And so my other friend and I were in the back seat, and I took the approach of, okay, let's test the water. So I think that's the thing. I test the waters to see like where are you at? Found out that this guy is Catholic. His 9-year-old son is quote unquote clearly gay, but he doesn't know how to approach it. He said, you know, he was raised in a very, very strict Catholic faith. He's still very much of that faith. He was told that being gay was bad, but he sees his son. He loves his son. He wants to understand him. And then it just opened up into this conversation, a beautiful conversation of like, look, like step into your son's perspective and think about it from where he's coming at, and he sees his father who doesn't accept him for who he is. You could tell it was like one of those moments for this guy where it was kind of life-changing, because at the end, he was just like, thank you so much. He's like, so what should I do? He just asked us like, what should I do? How do I, you know, and I was just like, just love him. He's your son. Like, you know, so I think that's the thing. It's gauging what their motives are and then assessing. And then, cause like, I won't, if someone's like, you know, oh, I wish it was a sin, you know, but it's like, they're not open enough to try to understand. Then I'd be like, you know what? I'm not casting my pearls before you. Like,
or like respecting you enough to say, hey, I assuming they know you a little bit. I know George. I know that if he had to go to his grave, a homosexual without any homosexual relationships, he would. Like if he knew that's what God asked, he would do that.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely. I mean, I've had that actually said to me too. They're like, have you ever thought about dating women? I was like, I did try dating women for many, many years. And, you know, and then they're like, oh, okay. Like, here's the deal. Like, and I think evangelical, you know, anyone who's listening that's more on the conservative side, like I didn't choose this life. If I had a choice, I would not be gay because, hey, look, I had to write a book about my experience about being in the church and how horrible, and not even just the church, being in secular community. So it's like my sexuality is not something that I chose to do. It's not like I was like, oh, I want to be gay and experience this hard life. If I had a choice in this, I would totally be straight. I relate to women more. Like I have a more of emotional connection with women, like all of that. Like I would love if I was sexually attracted to women. Yeah. I'm not. And there's times where I don't like that, especially when I go on countless dates and it just ends up being the same shit, different face, you know? But like at the end of the day, like I had to accept who I was because for so long I rejected who I was, and because I was told it was bad and I believed it was bad. And it's like, why would I put myself through all this pain and torture if I could choose who I was?
Exactly. I think about gay people throughout history, and is there in the gay community right now, is this something that you guys reflect on, being thankful that you're gay in 2022 and not 1950? I mean, seriously,
100%.
think of all the gay people that
Yeah.
never saw a rainbow represent gay people.
Right.
And they don't even know what gay pride means as far as what everybody else is. And that's the majority of the time for gay people.
Yeah. It's so funny because shortly after accepting my sexuality and getting immersed in the gay community, I did some research on that with Stonewall riots and all of that. And yes, 100% feel that way in the sense of like, I'm so glad that I wasn't in, it's kind of, it's similar to before, emancipation and separation, separate but equal and all of that, where it's like, there were people that set the stage for us who sacrificed so much of their lives for us to be able to have this. And it's like, it's funny because I'm not your stereotypical gay person in the sense of like, everything's rainbows and butterflies. Like I do get upset sometimes when people don't recognize what our forefathers have done for us and what, the legacy that they created for us to be able to put their lives out on the line, especially in the 80s and, the epidemic with AIDS and all of that and the federal government ignoring it for years and them fighting, just to have representation and then the viewpoint that they had of this, it's the gay sin or gay disease or whatever and all that shit. Now that I look at it, and especially with my own coming out and seeing what my brother went through, I'm like, I'm so thankful and I honor the people that were able to give me the opportunity to be able to, it's a kind of like, this country when we recognize veterans, it's like, these are veterans in our community who sacrificed their lives for us, for our freedoms. And it's like, we need to have that reverence. It's not to say that we can't have fun at gay parade, pride parades and all that, but the recognition of pride, it's funny because I always hear about, straight pride and all that. It's like, you were never oppressed. But I think that also gets lost in translation because all they see are, shirtless men dancing up on, booths and all that stuff. And they think like, oh, they're just flashing their homosexuality. It's like, no, like, there's a reason why we're proud. It's because we have some pretty amazing people who stood up for us and gave us this. Yeah.
Hopefully you're okay with how I word this. My goal here is for this podcast to be a place where anyone can listen to and not hear language that makes it sound like we think they're stupid. So I'm going to say it this way. I'm going to say, assuming that you and I are right, being gay and being in a gay relationship is totally fine and can be right in God's will. Do you think that we will get to a point in church history where we will look at this in the same way we looked at slavery? Because we still have racism, obviously, but there's very few people who, if you asked, what do you think about slavery? They'd say, oh, it was a good thing. Oh, I mean, I live in the South where there's a lot of racism. Right. I ain't never heard anybody say that. Do you think that there's going to be a time where we're like, I cannot believe. Now, I definitely think there's going to be a time where we'll be like, cannot believe we treated them that way. But will there be a time where we're like, I can't believe we all used to believe that they are sinning?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, to be honest, I don't put a lot of stock in fundamentalism or evangelical. I put a lot more stock in like the Methodist and movement. Correct. I think evangelicals unfortunately rode the tides of the political activism in the 70s and 80s and got us, Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, all these people that, sensationalized Christianity. With this deconstruction movement, honestly, I do think that that fundamentalism as we see it is a dying breed. And so it's going to be kind of like those people that died off, in the 50s and 60s, 70s, 80s that, knew what segregation looked like and were okay with it. Yeah, that's a very good question. How Christianity emerges from this, I'm curious, but I'm not putting a lot of stock into it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I had a really special moment yesterday. For the first time, I did what I would have called back in the day witness from a progressive lens. Like I had someone text me about something and they said something a little cute, like, well, you're closer to God than all of us. And I just responded. I was like, I'm trying to figure things out just like all of y'all. She's like, well, aren't you a pastor? Because this isn't like a super, super close friend. And I was able to go into, yes, I'm a pastor, but the more I learn about God, the more I realize the stuff I don't know. And you told her my theology and all of that, but just so interesting because I've never done that before. And I've talked to
ladies like Sarah Bessie. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she basically has had, I asked her on this show, I was like, hey, have you ever witnessed to people and seen people come to Jesus through progressive lens? And she's like, yes. I roll with those people via podcast and stay in touch.
It's so interesting because you look at like, like this, like let's progressivism, we could take it out of homosexuality. Like we see, let's put it in the context of socialism. Like Jesus was a socialist, like in many respects, like if we put it in the context of, women's rights, like Jesus loved women. Like it's so funny because like, I think what has happened and specifically in the fundamentalism evangelical, they've created a God in their own image. So it's like, to them. And then we see that radicalized in, sorry if there's any Trump people listening, but in the Trump era, where it was like this association with Trump and being God's chosen person. Like, my God, like if God really chose this, I want nothing to do with that God. Like, like send me to hell in first class mail, like I will be there at the bar waiting for all my other progressives. But it's like, you look at like, okay, so let's say this. Okay. If you do believe homosexuality is a sin, can we at least agree that I'm a human and that I deserve equal treatment under the law that is not set up by God? Like that's all that we're asking. Like nobody, it's like, you look at the gay agenda versus the evangelical agenda. And I've tokened that because there is an evangelical agenda. And I was speaking to a dear friend of mine about this, and he put it in the perfect terms where he was like, the concept of the evangelical doctrine towards homosexuality is obliteration. We want to see you gone. So that's why there's these don't say gay bills. That's why there's all these legislative actions in order to restrict the rights for LGBT people. How is that Christ-like in any way, shape, or form? I don't like. You can support my equality and justice as Jesus did without actually agreeing with my lifestyle. That's fine. I don't agree with your lifestyle. That's fine. We can commingle. We could be friends. Just recognize that I am a human being who deserves equal treatment under the law. That's all I'm asking.
There's no moving forward together unless that changes, because I'm with you. And I can even remember my days of being unaffirming, and it kind of sucked because I would say some of the funnest people to be around are gay dudes. Like, I don't think I've ever met a gay dude that doesn't make me smile and laugh. And I'm like, golly, that sucks. That's a sin. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just how I felt. Yeah. And it was kind of like those guys that really just are super misled. And so it puts me in this position of not even really being able to enjoy relationships with gay people. Let me ask you two more questions if you have time.
Absolutely.
One of them will be a quick one. The other one you'll probably laugh at, but all good. So the first one, I've been told that me using the word homosexual, which you've used a good bit, isn't that great. They would pair it with, it's just been used so much by fundamentalists, like the homosexuals and the drunkards and the murderers. Would you agree with that, or that kind of just goes in one ear and out the other? Like if you came on here and I said, hey, so okay, we've got the pastor that is now a homosexual, like would you be like, why did he say it that way?
No, it's funny. It is an antiquated word. I don't think it's emotionally charged in the way that like the F word is, which I've been called many, many times. It is antiquated, but I use the word because it is a commonly used word. It's church terminology. So it's like, it's like homosexual. It's funny because as I was like reading through, or like doing the edits on my book, like it was like, it even said that in Grammarly. It was like, this is an outdated word. And I'm like, but it describes, it's like if I said gay or if I said LGBTQ or whatever, I don't think it resonates with the reader or the followers as homosexual does, because
you're just being like Paul. Yeah, you're just being like Paul. You're speaking their language, man.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Right. So this has been kind of an ongoing debate on this show. It started with a pastor and then my friend arguing about the Billy Graham rule. Something that I've always thought was a good idea, probably the majority of my life. But last night, I have a online community, people like all the way. Most of them are deconstructed Christians. Some of them are more conservative. There's a few atheists, and it's funny because we were talking about potentially breaking out in pairs, and I knew what was coming, but I said, guys, and one of the guys that
that we were talking to is one of the atheists. And I was like, guys, I know this is going to sound crazy, and I'm okay with you guys teasing me, but I don't know how I feel about a guy and a girl partnering up. And I said, and it's not because I don't think that they can control themselves and they're just going to go find each other and hook up. I just know what someone's heart can do when you are getting that intimate, like with your words, like kind of accountability. And, my wife did this and my wife did that, and it's breaking my heart. Oh, but I also understand that I would say that I'm kind of caught in the middle. And if I had to pick, I would just say, let's just throw it away. Let's throw the Billy Graham rule away. And if I had to pick, I would say that, because I always want to dismiss legalism and be more into grace. But as a gay guy, what's interesting is if we had a big group, the Billy Graham rule would be different for you.
Right. Right.
Like if you're married to a guy, hey, don't partner George up with another guy. But backing up bird's eye view, just the Billy Graham rule in general, from your perspective, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I've never asked somebody that's gay what they thought about it.
Yeah, no, I love that. Rules are restricting. I think that's what it comes down to, is that rules were created by people who had a conviction about something that they, because I experienced that firsthand actually at the Church of Control. Like, prior to that, like the Bible studies were co-ed. When I went to this other church where I pastored at, there was no, like, it wasn't even just like gender. They were gender specific. Unless you were a married couple, then you'd be in the couples group. But we couldn't even hang out with women after like 8 or 9 o'clock. Like it was that kind of shit, it was like crazy. I think ultimately, I think as a good like for instance, in the context of like with your wife and, emotional intimacy, it is a thing. It is a thing. It's
happened to me before. My wife knows it. It's something that we dealt. It wasn't anything. I'll just go ahead and tell you to spell any sort of mystery. We were on a mission trip and I developed feelings for someone and it didn't go anywhere. She didn't know. I didn't know if she had feelings for me. We didn't touch each other, but I came home so freaking burdened. And I was like, I don't want that to ever happen to me again. Yeah, ever.
Absolutely.
It just was a sickening thing to get over these feelings. Yeah. While you're married to the person that's the most important in your life. And so having experienced that, I didn't go into that trip with those intentions. I don't even feel like I was lazy and irresponsible. Right. We happened to be on a team together with 16 people. That's a smaller group. And so we all got to know each other. Yeah. It's just tricky territory no matter what.
Absolutely. And I think that's what it comes down to, is like, what is, I think it comes back to the motive. It's like, I think we, especially in the Christian, absolute space, absolutism space, it's very much black and white. It's this or that. It's this or that. And it's like, life, like as I've been operating in the gray, I mean, yes, I have gay friends that I have had emotional feelings towards that weren't mutual. Like I've had, but that doesn't mean that I apply that rule to every single, it's like, now I can't hang out with guys that I, it's like, so it's like circumstantial, I think, it's like, what is the motive behind it? What are you trying to achieve? But because that's the thing. Like, I mean, you look at sexuality, for instance, like, it's like the reason why the homosexual community is known for sexual exploration is because there were no normatives that were, so we were able to define what sexuality was for us. Yeah. So I think that's the thing where it's like, I've tried everything. I've done everything, and it's like, I found out what for me works and what doesn't. And I think that's for the individual person themselves. They have to come up with that. Like the rules are to keep people safe. I think it has to be a personal choice.
Yep. Well, I'm proud of myself because that's what we ended up settling on, is this just needs to be case by case. If some people are uncomfortable and they think is dangerous, then don't do it. And if you feel good about it, and
love it.
What will people come away with? Is this book mostly biographical? Is it mostly theological? Is it is it a mixture? What do we have here?
It's a mixture. So I started off just telling my story, and then I have, I think, like 5 or 6 chapters that are specifically to thoughts. One of them's like on the concept of salvation and what that does to a person. I talk about homosexuality and what that does, the context. And then I talk about the history, but then I also talk about, the Bible and explaining it. So it really is just kind of I call it my journaling journey. Like it was very much like I told my story chronologically, but then I wanted to put these interrupting chapters in order to be able for people to ponder like what was actually going on in my brain. But the whole heart behind it is really just to have people that identify as LGBTQ, being able to relate to that story and had some sort of experience with religious trauma, like to be able to relate there. But then also for parents to be able to understand what is actually going on in your child's brain, like what is happening, like, and the ideas that you may think are helping them, like, are actually hurting them. So it's kind of, and then for those who want to hear a good story too. I mean, there's some pretty like scandalous stuff in there too, but yeah, it's a mix of everything, honestly, like, because I don't consider myself a Christian anymore. But I do have a lot of thoughts about Christianity and my experience and my stuff. I literally have enough like Bible classes to have a master's degree. I mean, even possibly a PhD. Like, so just reflecting on that and coming at it from a different angle and being able, like, don't read this if you don't have an open mind. That's it. Like,
right, exactly. Well, I don't know if you noticed, but we let a patron in here just to listen and watch. But honestly, it was for the purpose of Billy Graham rule. I saw some pictures of you, and I was like, man, I just need someone else to.
Ooh. Joey, I'm going to text you after this. Don't tell your wife.
Perfect. Right.
If there's anybody that's listening to this that is, questioning whether about sexuality or their faith or whatever, like, I am 100% accessible on Instagram. DM me. I would love to talk with you at my gay church days. That's really what I want my quote unquote brand to be, is that just to be accessible and to be able to highlight and just help people. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Yep. Awesome. We'll point people in that direction in the show notes, and I appreciate it.
I'm all about the money, all I know is survival. Bitches asking me for bread, I change the subject.